Being 7 o'clock, I'm going to call the July 27th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Sewer Commissioners to order in open session. Note, this meeting is being televised, streamed, or recorded by Bourne Community TV. If anyone in the audience is recording or videotaping, they need to acknowledge it at this time. Michael Roche. All items within the agenda are subject to deliberation and votes by the Board of Selectmen. We begin with a moment of silence to recognize our troops and public safety personnel. Thank you. Next is salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is reading the vision statement. Judith Froman.
Thank you. Bourne is a proud community that embraces change while respecting the rich heritage of the town and its villages. It is a municipality based on strong fiscal government with a durable economy that recognizes the rights of all citizens, respects the environment, especially the coastal areas of the community, and the amenities that it affords. Bourne embraces excellent education and offers to citizens a healthy, active lifestyle.
Thank you. Next is the mission statement. Jerry?
The Bourne mission. Bourne will maximize opportunities for social and economic development while retaining an attractive, sustainable, and secure coastline and environment for the enjoyment of residents and visitors. Through responsible and professional leadership and in partnership with others, Bourne will strive to improve the quality of life for all residents living and working in the larger community.
Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. Public comments are allowed for up to a total of 12 minutes at the beginning of each meeting. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes for comment. Based on past practice, members of the board are not allowed to comment or respond. Is there any public comment?
No one has signed up, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Glenn. Next item is approval of minutes. The first is the minutes of April 13th, 2021.
Motion to approve the minutes of April 13th, 2021.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? 5-0-0. Next is the minutes of May 26, 2021.
Motion to approve the minutes of May 26th, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Peter Meyer. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. Jared McDonald. Next is the minutes of May 27th, 2021.
Motion to approve the minutes of May 27th, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Peter Meyer. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. 4-0-1.
It actually should be 2. 3-0-2.
One
Two
abstain
abstentions.
also? 4-0-2.
302. Sorry. 302.
302.
3-0-2. Okay.
Sorry.
Iron Man.
Don't worry, we got you covered.
Okay, next item is the Board of Sewer Commissioners business. First item is the sewer overage bill abatement request.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we received an abatement request from Linda Crockett, who lives in Hideaway Village. We don't get too many of these, but they do require quite a bit of research, primarily because we try to figure out what actually happened. As you know, the sewer bill is related to water use, and so what we really try to determine is if the water did run through the meter, where did the water go? In some cases, it could be a broken water heater or whatever, so it did not actually go through the sewer system and, wasn't treated through our agreement and system in Wareham. And so I actually have Kathleen Thutt here, who's going to come up and kind of give you the background. I asked her to kind of research this one for me to get all the details and kind of the way that, we try to track back to see if we can figure out actually what happened. So Kathleen, if you want to just come to the microphone, a lot of that detail's in your packet, but I think at the end of the day, I think this one has been solved, at least by the preponderance of the evidence.
Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. So Ms. Crockett called because she was concerned originally by an enormous overage bill, something she had never encountered before in her home. And if you look back at her usage, it runs about 14 or 15,000 gallons. This bill happened to be well over 100,000 gallons. So this was far beyond anything she had used or seen before out of her address. She is a seasonal resident, and typically her water gets turned on in April by the water department and turned off again in November. Her bill covering January through the end of June in 2020 was an average bill for her. As you can see through her packet, ran about $90. The July through December bill was the bill that constituted the enormous overage. Now, the water department did turn off her meter, or turn off her water on November 4th. So in fact, the overage would have occurred July 1st through November 4th. Over 100,000 gallons in 3 or 4 months seems questionable to us, and we were unable to figure it out. Now, the water department did check her meter on that November 4th when they turned it off and they noticed such a huge usage, and deemed it in working order. However, in April, they did change her water meter, April of 2021. And her usage this year has gone back down to the normal. So that July through November period is really an anomaly. And she, as you can see in the packet she provided, she did have a plumber come out and look. He was unable to find anything, fix anything. So she has requested an abatement, respectfully.
Thank you.
So I think in this case, certainly, it's hard to get it to beyond a reasonable doubt, but I think the preponderance of the evidence is there. If you know Hideaway Village, most of those cottages, if you will, are only about 400 square feet. And so, if that amount of water went through the meter and there was something catastrophic in the house, that would have been clearly noticeable. So, and having dealt with residents that have, leaking toilets and things like that are running, they need to run for a long time to use 100,000 gallons of water. So I think in this case, I think the water department eventually said, there's just something isn't right here, and decided to replace her meter, and they've been monitoring it since they turned the water back on, and everything is as it had been for all those previous billing cycles. So we're very confident that whatever happened, it didn't go through the sewer system. It may have just been fictitious, if you will.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Peter.
I'd like to make a motion to grant a sewer overs abatement to Lisa Crockett at 26S Bogview Drive in the amount of $730, and any demand or interest charges on the sewer bill number 12282.
Second.
Motion by Peter, second by Judy. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Jared?
I'd just like to add, I actually have been to that residence and worked in that residence. It's almost on a little peninsula, so there's no way that amount of water would not have been noticed. It's literally impossible. So obviously, this is the right direction.
Okay. Any further discussion by the board? questions from the public? Okay. All in favor of the motion to grant an abatement?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? It's unanimous, 500. Okay, next item on the agenda is comprehensive wastewater management plan update. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Kate Rosa with Environmental Partners. Tony, if you could pull up our slides, it might be
Okay.
helpful. I did prepare just a short slide presentation. It is the exact same information that is in the public workshop summary and the project update, but I thought it might be helpful just to give a little bit more detail on the graphics. I'm just here to report what we learned from our public summaries. Next slide. And to kind of show you what we learned from those public workshop sessions on May 26th and 27th of this year. So just to give you some overview numbers, we had over 80 participants between both sessions, and we received 18 public comment letters via email to our Bourne CWMP email address setup. We received 45 comments via the public map, which is the image on the right that we had set up through the website, and we received the over 100 signatures on a petition in opposition from the Save the Cape Cod Canal group, the committee to save the Cape Cod Canal. So going back to this pie chart, this was based on information that was collected during the public workshop. So if you didn't attend, refresher, we had breakout rooms where residents were encouraged to tell their stories about their neighborhood water quality concerns. And what we did was tabulated from the moderators who took notes, just a really quick frequency of how many times words or phrases came up in conversation. And the number one item was related to stormwater management. So these were words like runoff, catch basins, just stormwater concerns in the neighborhood. The second item of concern was eelgrass, and most times it was related to the loss of eelgrass habitat. And then the third top item was the MMA outfall. There was definitely a lot of concern from community members about that potential project, as it's a proposed project. So what we're taking away from this public workshop summary are some really good talking points to put into fact sheets that we can then post on the CWMP website. So we're working with town staff to draft an It's All Connected worksheet to kind of talk a little bit more about how stormwater management and eelgrass are connected with nitrogen pollution concerns that are covered by the CWMP. So were there any comments or questions, I guess, that I could answer just about public comment summary?
Is there any questions from the board?
Good.
Any questions from the public? Okay, is this presentation now on the CWMP page of the website? The whole
From the workshops, the May 26th and 27 workshops, both of the slide presentations are on the CWMP
Oh, I meant
website.
this one?
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
The public workshop summary sheet that's included in the packets
Okay,
is in the process of being uploaded.
thank you.
And then Tony, can you just hit next slide, because I wanted to see, I go into the next agenda item. Should I just stay up and do?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, just,
I'm gonna move to the next item on the agenda is the
Which-
timeline update.
timeline and target dates for the CWMP milestone reports and meetings. Okay,
So I wanted to just take a look at the work that was completed, just to give you an idea of where we are. So the project update is also going to be posted to the CWMP website, if it's not already there. And we basically are going to post the project summary from the two workshops, and then also this update talking about when the next two workshops will be. But anyway, we incorporated the comments from the Board of Sewer Commissioners and Mass DEP and finalized our plan of study, so that is now final. We conducted the workshops and have summarized our public meeting comments from that meeting. The letters and other feedback that were collected will be included in the final CWMP as an appendix. So all of the additional backup we have record of and will keep. We have begun the literature review of previous studies that have been done for the town of Bourne, and we're posting additional background documents. We've posted background documents, and we'll continue to post background documents as they become available to the Bourne CWMP website. Next slide. And then our work planned is to continue our analysis of the on-site systems and to assess wastewater flows and future risks relating to that. We're going to post additional fact sheets, like I mentioned, the It's All Connected fact sheet. And we're going to coordinate with stakeholders for public workshops and educational events. And then eventually we'll have our next public workshop to present the needs assessment findings. So if you hit the next slide, Tony, that should be, yep, kind of just a short outline of what those dates are. So we have in August an town staff workshop to review our needs assessment and to conduct just like a draft review checkpoint. We have our next update to the Sewer Commission in September, as well as the Cape Cod Canal Day Public Education booth. So that's a new item, our September 18th Public Education booth. And then in October is when we're expecting to have that public workshop for the needs assessment. And these dates are also included in your meeting packet. They're represented visually. Hit the next slide. This is what our 2021 calendar year look ahead looks like. So that brings us to this schedule. And those were all the slides that I had prepared, but we can answer any questions on the schedule at this time if you have them.
Does anyone from the board have any questions? So, so the meeting, the September 18th meeting, it's not really on the Gantt chart, right? It's kind of a new thing that you've added. What about update 3 to the Sewer Commission? Is that tied to any particular task on the Gantt chart?
We have, as a part of our regular progress reporting towards the CWMP completion, regular quarterly meetings with the Board of Sewer Commissioners,
Okay.
which includes the monthly update or report out. So that single page project update to show what work we've completed during the last quarter and what work we have planned for the following quarter.
So is the update 3 to the sewer commissioners like a monthly updated paper, or is it a quarterly update? I'm a very like task-oriented, project-oriented. I want to, I like to plan my, how things are working. So,
They're intended to be quarterly.
so is the September 2021 quarterly?
Yeah.
That third is
In the
quarterly.
contract, it's a quarterly meeting.
Okay.
And just so you know, so September 18th is Canal Day. And we're going to announce it at our next meeting, but Helen Gordon and I will be sitting out at Canal Day distributing literature on the comprehensive wastewater management plan. We're going to have other town staff there, going to make it more of like a water resources booth.
Great.
But yeah, to get information out there. Sam Haynes, our conservation agent, has some information to get out about stormwater and the MS4 permitting requirements, and Tim Lydon has to be there for FEMA, was it? FEMA, yeah, the FEMA regulations.
Right.
So we all have,
Different
components
things
we
to
have- yeah,
talk to
exactly.
people about.
Yeah,
That
so
will
there'll be
that's a great,
a lot of information there.
yeah, that's good.
So that's kind of an extra meeting that we've added in, but Helen's volunteered to come down and sit for at least part of the day. But then there are regular quarterly meetings. And I'm not sure if the date coordinates with our schedule, but we'll line those up.
Right, so that, I mean, if we figure September's a quarterly meeting, I can kind of go from there and say, this is when we can expect to have them. And then that's how I like to
Yeah.
roll. Get our starting point, this is our quarterly. Okay, awesome.
Well, I would imagine environmental partners would also, they, if they have a due date, it makes it a lot easier than a floating due date, right?
Yes, got to
the due
stay
date
on
is tomorrow.
schedule. That's what we do. That's what we do.
MJ?
Yes, Peter. Judy.
That's
Okay.
okay. I know at the last Canal Day, the town had a booth, and it was very popular, and, it was just great visibility, and I think that encompasses the community, engaging the community, and sending people there to talk to, see what people look like outside their buildings. So, thank you.
I'm coming at the end of the day with a lot of questions.
There you go.
I'll let you, I'll forewarn you. Citing, Jared's citing.
I do have one other question. If nobody else, does anyone else in the public or anybody have a question? I do have, it has to do with the bullet point about reaching out to stakeholders, coordinate with stakeholders for public workshops on educational events. So could you talk a little bit about that plan? And one of the reasons I'm bringing that up is that we're going to have a discussion later tonight about possibly reactivating our wastewater advisory committee, so.
Right. So right now, we have, as part of the workshop that we just ran, we gathered all the information from town staff on the stakeholders that exist in relationship to water resources and who would be interested to make sure that we're reaching out to them. We had a list. We've gotten some additional add-on to that list based on some of the emails we received at the Bourne Mass email that we set up.
Mhm.
And the goal is to reach out with information provided to town staff and to be able to give them enough information so if there's a stakeholder meeting that occurs, it can be attended by somebody from the town staff and they can share what's going on.
Great. That's good. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions related to the CWMP or the schedule? And I think this kind of shows January 2024. Is that our final submission date? So that's what we're aiming for.
Correct.
Okay. We'll get to know each other. Awesome, thank you. It's very helpful to have this big like this too, though, because you can really read it. And I like to be able to read it. Okay, very good. So the next item on the agenda is going into the Board of Sewer Commissioners workshop. And the first item is annual sewer user rates to review and discuss annual sewer user rates, overage fees, and other sewer user fees and charges. Mr. Schiavi.
So obviously, one of the things that we were given to take a look at by the chair was to see, if we made some, I'll say, penny adjustments to the overage. Right now, we do a penny a gallon for the overage, right? So we have our base rate. And then, that's one of the things that the Board of Sewer Commissioners votes on. And then we have the overage fee, right? And what does that, generate for those that go over the 45,000, gallons that the base rate is, paying for. And so we've been a penny a gallon, I think, for quite a while. So we took a look, it's pretty basic. So right now in the budget, we have 130,000 estimated overage. You'll see over time that, we're 30 and 40. But when you look back historically at what we actually collected, was actually in the mid to high 120s, which is why for FY22 we actually bumped it back down because we were not, generating the type of overage fees. Because again, we're estimating that, right? So there's no, just like we do with other forms of revenue, we have to make, best guess estimates on our revenue. So, so obviously a penny a gallon generates $130,000. You can see that, if we go to 0.012 cents per gallon, we're generating an extra 26,000 in revenue, .013 about 39,000 in revenue, and so on, up to, if we looked at .015 cents for the overage, about $65,000 more than the 130, so 195. So it does, and as you remember, roughly speaking, about every $100,000 either we reduce or we gain in revenue is about $100 on the rate. So if you recall, with the Cape Islands Water Protection Fund, we reduced the budget by about $26,000, which generated in the rate of $4. So you can see how that works. So for easy math, we just say it's roughly $100 for 100,000 that you affect one way or the other. So, you know, what I would say, and I know I've talked to you all about this before, and I think I even mentioned it to, you know, the Finance Committee when we're going through the budget process. Just the way that I look at this, we can I'll say play with pennies by, you know, making these slight adjustments. But my personal feeling is that we're attacking this problem from the wrong end of it, and I think that really what we need to really get our arms around is we look at the root cause of why do we have, you know, sort of these large increases in the rates. Part of it is just normal increase in the cost of doing business. Obviously, the new sewer plant, we obviously know adds cost to the enterprise fund, which, think of it as a closed system, right? Everything's within that enterprise fund, and frankly, we're, you know, not paying for, but we're having to deal with some of the decisions, obviously, that were made over many years in the past, you know, about, you know, using retained earnings and what effect that has on the rate. But the long and the short of it is, if it stays a closed system, I don't think you have to really look too deeply to realize that it's about users, right? We need more users on this system. We've actually lost users. And so when you look at over time, and, you know, regardless of whether Savory Ave should or shouldn't have been in the sewer system, you had a number of houses that were supporting the enterprise fund for many, many years, right? They're gone. We've lost other accounts. And so it's really about users. We need to add users into this system. You know, we have 300,000 gallons of capacity. We need to figure out what is the right path for using that 300,000 gallons. Some of we know we have to reserve for economic development, but I think the tough decision, for the board, and what I would suggest that you all do, because we won't find the answer on a piece of paper or looking at the rate sheet per se, but figure out where is the low-hanging fruit where we can add users to our system. And I think, I don't think we have to wait till the CWMP is finished, because I don't think we can afford to do that. I think if we really look at this problem, we will find low-hanging fruit. Now, the challenge for the board is, and you see it in Barnstable, they just came out and said, look, everybody's getting charged $10,000, whether you like it or not, because we got to pay almost $1 billion for, you know, sewering our town. I live in Harvard, same thing. So the pipe goes in the house, I connect. And so you're going to hear from people that are on both sides of that. We know water quality is our number one issue. We know that it's really important that we protect our water resources and all of that. And so to me, the answer is a standard one, and every time you get a question about that, it's for the greater good of our community, of our environment, and all of that. And so as we look at ways to affect the rate, which is, whether it's looking at the overage fees or looking at something else, that may need to run in tandem and parallel, but we will never solve it by just looking at how do I change the rate a few dollars here and there. We got to take big bites at the apple at some point. And frankly, it'll be some tough discussions, I think, with the board, with the community areas that may be required to hook up to the sewer system, because if we don't figure out how to add users, then it's going to be a tough problem to solve. Now, the other side of that, I would say, obviously, is our deal with Wareham. And not to criticize decisions that were made in the past, but I don't think the letter that was done with Wareham back in 2019 was in the best interest of the town. Certainly, this board didn't know about it. And whether that was okay or not okay isn't really the question, but this board is the one that decides the rates. And that agreement has, you know, major implications about how we have to set the rates, because it's fixed price. But what wasn't in there, in knowing that we had a plant ready to go into construction, and if everything, you know, if COVID didn't happen, it would have been online probably a year and a half ago, is there was nothing in there to protect the town of Bourne when we flipped the switch over here at the corner of the community center and shift a whole big part of our flow from Wareham to our own plant. And, what do we need to do? So I think the next big thing on the board's agenda really needs to be getting on Wareham, right? Because I didn't feel that that was something I should just do on my own. And the board never directed me to go and do that, because I think the Board of Sewer Commissioners need to have either direction of the town administrator to go do, or the town administrator and members of this board to enter in that type of a negotiation with Wareham. But we need to do that. And I would encourage you to look at getting that started, sooner rather than later, because that is a piece of the puzzle. So, but as it relates to the overage things, again, and I kind of equate it to the discussion we have every year in the fall. We do our tax rate setting meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and we go through the analysis that we have to go through about whether we split the tax rate or whether we don't. Because some of the very same reasons that we don't split a tax rate, because it shifts too much of the burden on the commercial side of the equation, and what negative impacts that can have on economic development and businesses staying in our community. This kind of thing can also, because we know typically your big overage users are going to be commercial type entities. And so, again, you got to be really careful about, you do the math, but at the same time, the more, I'll say, fuzzy and sort of, you got to go with your gut about, is that a good thing or not for the business community? Will it have a negative impact on that? So there's a lot of pieces to this, and I know the board's going to eventually talk about sort of the allocation fees, connection fees, all of that. Again, when we did the study with Ty and Bond and the results of that, and we kind of chewed on that for quite a while with the last Board of Sewer Commissioners, it's got to get lowered. I mean, that's just a bite that you put on the commercial. You will not get people to want to invest in our downtown, because I've heard a lot from the owner of the hotel and others about how much they look at the fees before they come in and build a project, even though it could be a $10, $15, $20 million project. They don't have endless pockets, so they do look at it and says, hey, if I got to pay $250 to the water department and $250,000 to you guys, I mean, that's a $500,000. I got to figure out how to work that into the pro forma of this project. And they evaluate that when they decide which communities they want to invest in and build projects. So, so we have to set the rates next month. My thing is, I think we need to have more discussion about this. Certainly, we'll flow in the $24 decrease, which lowers it a little bit. But I think you set it based on that would be my recommendation, because you have other opportunities to make adjustments, because we do this twice a year. And if you have over the next, say, 6 months or so, 5 months, the ability to find other places where you might be able to affect the rates while you're tackling some of these bigger type issues, you can lay them in, when you do the February, vote on the second half, sewer bill. So, that's kind of where we're at. You have a spreadsheet in there. MJ had asked us to take a look at, what the rates would be with retained earnings and without. So the sheet you're looking at is in a little slightly different format. And I don't know, you asked, do you want to put this on the television for the chair?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard if people watching at home and we start talking about numbers and you can't see them. Sometimes you can't see them even when they're up on the TV anyway, unless they're really big. I think, and thank you, Tony, I think you brought up a lot of really important issues that we have to tackle. And in terms of the IMA, I think that I would like to schedule for our next meeting in August, I'd like to schedule an executive session before the meeting to talk about strategy. I mean, this is a negotiation, and so I think if we, as a board, have an executive session to talk about strategy for the IMA agreement and bring Tony into that discussion, I think it would be worthwhile. So,
Madam Chair, can I
like to
just
do
add
that.
on to that? So Tony brings up a really good point, and it was in the newspaper. It was explained that we were working outside the bounds, as it was quoted from me. And that outside the bounds was working outside the limitations of trying to get 2 full sewer boards to come to a meeting on a regular weekly or biweekly basis. The previous Board of Sewer Commissioners had voted on 2 of us to meet with Wareham sewer commissioners and meet with two of their sewer commissioners so that we could work together to try and figure out some of the issues. One of them specifically is the administrative fee, which, you know, Tony talked about. That agreement was done outside of the Board of Sewer Commissioners. It was done specifically by one person. Whether it's right or wrong really doesn't matter anymore. The important part was that we were really making progress. Myself and Jim Potter were both voted as the two sewer commissioners to work with Wareham and point out and find some of these issues, and it was challenging. There's the administrative fee from Wareham is like reading a scientific novel. It just, and it changes every time you look at it. So when you took those and put them next to each other, you know, the numbers went back and forth in different line items, but the bottom line was they always managed to get almost the same exact number at the bottom. So it was almost as if numbers were just being hucked in there like a baseball, just to make sure we reached a certain point. And so during that time when myself and Jim Potter were meeting with them, it was going really well until a certain point. It started to become a struggle, and that struggle came from Wareham, you know, from those mechanisms within the sewer commissioners and the select board, because the sewer commissioners don't really have the ability to make decisions. In Wareham, their system is that the select board makes those decisions and votes on them. So we got to a certain point, and it was going very well between the four sewer commissioners, two from here and two from Wareham, but it kind of hit that wall once it had to go past the sewer commissioners and to the select board in Wareham. It would be nice if we could maybe do something like that again. Again, it's, you know, it's not easy to get all these boards together in one place and, you know, post all the meetings and that type of thing. So myself and Jim Potter were actually voted from the last board to go and do that, and I don't see that that's not a bad thing to do again. It definitely made it easier, and we were able to have quite a few meetings, just because 4 people rather than 15, you know, is so much easier. So, you know, I know that we voted on it, and we did that last time. I don't know if that's something that would be, you know,
Well, I think we have to I think we have to discuss
Yeah.
it. I think it's good not only to discuss who should be doing the negotiating and how that should go, but also to talk about our strategy and what we're trying to accomplish in a negotiation. Judy?
Through the chair, thank you. I do know that the directive and the action was, you know, with the previous combination of people, was that it was to kind of fact-finding, you know, what's the path. There was no negotiation going on, and I think, you know, to pick up, I just kind of picked up on what you were saying, like in social media or something. You know, there was some talk about, you know, negotiating and, you know, working outside the bounds of the sewer commissioners. And I do know that that wasn't what the directive was, and that wasn't what was reported back to us, that it was really, you know, this is just kind of for the record, that was for information. And we did have, I know that we had a joint meeting with the sewer commissioners, and it was really incredibly not productive. So if there can be something that's productive, that's a smaller combination of people, I think, given what we learned, that might be a direction we could consider, so.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I think it would be good to do that. I mean, it is a purpose, an exemption for you know, to have a executive session to talk about strategy for negotiations. So I think that would be good. And we could discuss who should be negotiating, and should we be bringing in some experts in the field who, you know, understand the rates and how they work and how they work better or best, you know,
So-
rather than us trying to like reinvent the wheel from people that actually do this for a living.
So if I may, just to
Yeah.
follow up on that, so that very much was the intent when we started that was, like Judy said, it was very much a fact-finding venture, to get two people from each board together to try and hash through what was being changed, what was being put down as numbers. And then all that was reported back to the board, full board, from those two people, myself and Jim Potter. And, it was very interesting to learn and see how these things were done. But the intention was at a certain period of time to try and bring all that information together and bring people in to help us negotiate that and work that out. So it was the intention. Unfortunately, with COVID, all those meetings were shut down, and so we lost that ability to hash through that administrative fee. And I think that's one of the biggest items that we really have to work on. That administrative fee is just something that has to be.
Yeah, there are a couple things in that, the staffing and the administrative fee are, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting things.
Yes, so we shall have further discussion on that, but so let's kind of go back to the sewer rates, because we're kind of getting a little off time, unless you want to, go ahead, Tony.
Just one more thing on that, because I would, so the IMA is obviously a large document. I think it still has, what, is it 2030, Glenn? It's got like 9 more years. I mean, it's got quite a bit of time on it.
Right.
I think you need to do a dual track. On the IMA, it's a big animal, a lot of stuff. Part of that more immediate is renegotiating the one-page letter with the fixed fee, because you got to light a fire a little bit, because we're going to be turning this on in another 10 days or so. And I can talk a little bit more about some of the strategy stuff we've talked about that we can do in that executive session. So I think there should be kind of a dual track with that,
Yeah,
just
I agree.
because of the timing of it. But so anyway, so back to the rates. So right now, if you just look at the budget as it was approved at town meeting, and the adjustment that we can make in the fall with the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund and reducing the debt service by $26,000 approximately, would lower the rate from $12.07 to $11.83, which would be about a $259 increase. Now, if you recall, we started at about $500 or a little bit more when we first did the budget. Obviously, we took out the Savory app piece. We took out a few different things. We got more information about when our loan would close, so we had backed some numbers out then. And then we obviously laid in the subsidy that we just were awarded for the project. So, and if you remember, that subsidy gets divided between the general fund and the sewer enterprise fund as well. So right now we're at 1183. Again, I think we probably ought to base the rate, since we have to vote next month in order to be able to get those sewer bills out on time. And then just analyze over the next few months, do we want to make any more tweaks to this, give an opportunity maybe to get a little bit more of the fidelity on who makes up the $130,000 in overage? Because again, before you want to change the overage rate, maybe you want to take a little bit more deeper dive in that. We didn't have time to do that before this meeting. And you can do on that, over the course of a couple of meetings, and decide whether you want to make a potential adjustment in that as well.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's something I've never had to pay. I'm not a sewer user, so I've never had to pay the bills. I know we vote them, bills go out we vote them in August, and they go out maybe August and February. But is the overage from January 1st to December 30th? How is the overage calculated? It's not, the overage doesn't start July 1st, does it?
No.
It starts, it's a yearly overage thing.
Right.
So, that is something that we could have, we're on the current rate, you don't want to change it mid-year, right? Because
right.
people are planning. But if we were to have some discussion about changing the rate as of January 1st on the overage, and we could do that by the town meeting, maybe we could,
Right.
have something. One of the reasons that a lot of this discussion about changing the overage rate came out of all of the analysis that was done around the wastewater facility and the users and the potential users. And when we were looking at that, we had 450 potential users, and a lot of that hasn't happened. The hotel has come. Calamar has been delayed. That's 122 users, because they're individual residential apartments that are each charged as a user. The hotel, we were originally told when we were doing the financial analysis, would be 100 users, but they're really one user and with overage, so it's a little bit different. But then there was the Mackenzie property, and then the Wagner Way property, and we didn't even count the other property that's, you know, in that mix from,
Yeah, 2 Kendall Ray Place.
the 2 Kendall Ray Place. So, but when we looked at it, we were looking at like 450 new users coming in, and that's what we were building the plan for, and they were, I mean, it's slower, but, so there is process, but we should be talking about, I think you're absolutely right, talking about users and what users, and, you know, maybe we should be bringing in Mass Maritime. I mean, and that's a good thing to talk about, because their seasonal usage is opposite of our seasonal high usage. So even though, so you think of all the Hideaway Village people and all the Taylor Point people that are all here in the summer, and then they leave, and then the Mass Maritime people, and you could almost leverage that on the average daily balance and bring that right into our system, like, soon, which would be really awesome, because it would get nitrogen out of the canal. Judy.
Thank you. So I know, like, in one of the phases, I talked about having, sewering some of the area around Buttermilk Bay and that type of thing. I would like to have more conversation about that, you know, see what's actually involved with that, because, you know, there's a lot of concern, obviously, when we were looking at the, you know, what people's concerns are, the stormwater runoff and also the nitrogen and all getting into the water. And, you know, I think, you know, we live in our nice little green pieces of property because we put down all kinds of fertilizer that goes right into the ocean. Or, you know, the home septic systems. I mean, even if you're a ways away from the ocean, it still, you know, goes downhill, goes underground and gets there. But some of the areas are even more delicate, and I would like to have, you know, just a little bit of information from environmental partners and from staff about, you know, what are some of the areas that we might be able to consider, you know, even just, we have to start talking about sewering, you know, some of the neighborhoods, you know, residential homes, because I think that's the direction I expect that we'll be going, you know, anyway. So let's start talking at this point.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So we're getting ready to do a project in conjunction with the water department on Old Bridge Road. Now, when that project was, if you know about Old Bridge Road, the sewer stops, but there's probably 4 or 5, you know, houses or apartments or whatever. When that project was designed, it's too late now, but that should have been part of the plan. We need to, while we have the road open, keep that trench going and, you know, take it all the way to the end of the road and connect those folks in, right? And we know there's people that are sort of one step back from Main Street, right, that aren't part of the sewer system, right? How many is that? You know, we got to start incorporating that into our thought process. You know, unfortunately, on the Old Bridge Road, you know, that's water under the bridge, so to speak, at this point, because it's going to be, you know, done here in another, you know, month. It'll be under construction, but that was an opportunity lost, you know, and so we just, you know, need to think about those things and incorporate as we do things to say, hey, you know, how could sewer potentially factor into a project that may be initiated for a totally different reason, but you know, our mindset needs to change to consider, hey, what if, and who could we potentially connect in when we're doing other types of work in the Buzzards Bay, you know, sort of sewer district, but.
So one thing, there is a map that has different areas. Like when you look at the IMA, it says we can sewer area, I'm going to say A, B, and C, but I don't know if that's exactly what it is. But there's also these areas D, E, and F, which are some of the other areas. And it says in the IMA that those aren't included in the IMA. So that is a thing that we need to put on the table when we talk about the IMA, because I know that was, you know, something that and so when we built the wastewater facility, we used existing users and other people that were in those defined areas that were allowable. And I was looking at, I was trying to find the map. I have a map of the sewers, but I don't think I have the phase map, or if I do, I don't know exactly where it is.
Yeah, and the Buzzards Bay Coalition remember, they did a project, right, where they looked at the potential connections for the area behind our plant. I forget how many
there's
potential
a
users
lot.
there were, but there were a lot.
I remember
Maybe
seeing that.
124
Yeah.
Yeah.
off the
Yeah.
top of my head.
Yeah.
But then if you look at Mass Maritime, which is trying to connect into the Wareham plant, I mean, that's one of the reasons that this plan is going, because they want to connect in. But that sewer line ends very close to Mass Maritime, so it would not be a heavy lift to get that coming into the sewer system.
They're open to discussion, Mass Maritime is. They have not said one way or another whether, they want to tap into Wareham or they want to
Their
do.
own thing.
But they have specifically said to the town of Bourne, we want to work with you because we're in the town of Bourne. So they're open to and excited to see the CWMP. Did I get all the right letters? Put it in the right order. So I think it is, the discussions need to happen. One of the things that, when you talk about, when Tony talks about having, making sure that we're thinking about these things at the get-go when things are being developed, maybe, I would like to have us figure out a way to set that into some protocol or practices that we have, and that we work together with town planner or whoever, whatever avenue it is, so that there's an open communication about, what's on the horizon. So,
Yeah,
MJ?
Peter keeps.
Peter.
My biggest fear, if we talk about expansion over in Buzzards Bay, is you have waterfront properties that are put in $50,000, $50,000 alternative septic systems, and then you go and you expand, and all of a sudden you're going to be forced after you spend all that money. You may want to, we need to have a serious discussion to see what's practical or not, because on the other extreme, the areas of town that you may want to go to next are the poorest part of the town, where some of these people connecting to sewer and paying betterments, it's going to be the beginning of the end. And so, from a funding source, we may want, if we do want to go down that road, we may want to look at some alternative funding to help offset the costs, because you one of two ways. You're going to go after the person who, like you said, who can afford, but we just put all that money out on a brand new system, or on the other stream, the person doesn't have the money to go forward. And I know there's the county loan program for septic, but when it comes to sewer, I don't think there is any other loan program for the betterment.
I mean, I think this is why we have a CWMP going, because these are big things that we need to have the experts help us on weighing those decisions. But we're also going to have to look, I think in Falmouth, the sewer infrastructure is paid by the town. I mean, and you can have an enterprise fund and still have it paid by the town, that's why the town paid for part of the wastewater. Or you can set up a sewer department, which is what Tony talks about. I think as we go through this process, it's, the right answer is going to be like cream. It's going to rise to the top. I mean, you're going to figure out, we're going to end up sewering most of the town, so having a sewer department makes the most sense. Or we're going to go more of an alternative system way, and so it might not make sense, but support of the infrastructure costs by the general fund, which can be done in an enterprise fund, it's recognized, maybe that's the way to go. So there's a lot of big decisions that we have to make, and we just have to kind of do them, piecemeal at a time. One of the things that I think is really important when you look at the rate analysis, with no retained earnings, because retained earnings, when you throw it in there or don't throw it in there, or use it or you don't use it, it artificially changes the rates. And so the rate in 2021 with no retained earnings was either $1,098 or $1,097, depending, in July or November. And the rate with no retained earnings in this year is $1,230, based on the budget reduction. And that's a $133 increase. And so looking at the rates without the retained earnings is, I think, a really important thing to do. Because we're really increasing the rate from $1,051 to $1,183, you know, the 924 was a gift.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part too is, and we talked about this at one point last year, just in terms of, what are, considered the best practices for an enterprise fund and how much retained earnings, which is essentially an enterprise fund term for free cash, right, that goes to, certain things. But the amount you have, what that doesn't consider is the health of your system, right? So to me, when they put that out there, that means you have a healthy system that's been operated and maintained in accordance with best practices, and your retained earnings there for, sort of the odd emergency that you might have. The reality we all have to accept is our system is in poor condition. It just has not been upkept and maintained the way that it should be. I mean, we're getting ready to put a $50,000 monster muffin pump right down the street here, and then we're spending a considerable amount of money to take a look at engineering problems at the Taylor Point pump station, right? So now that doesn't include the condition of our actual pipes in the ground, but as we get ready to kind of get the final draft before we present it to you all on the inflow and infiltration study, will give us more data about the potential condition of our infrastructure and, where do we have I&I getting into our system that needs to be addressed, particularly if it's coming from, degraded infrastructure and things like that. So that's why I was sort of very adamant last year about, even though it seemed like we had a lot, you got to measure it against what do you think the health of your system is. And so if your car is new and running, you're not so much worried that something's going to happen. But the older your car gets, most people say, look, I need a pot of money over here, so when something bad happens to my car, I have the resources to get my vehicle fixed so I can, get back and forth to work or whatever. It's kind of the same analogy, and I think we have to think about it from a financial standpoint very similarly to that $600,000 is not enough for the work we know we're going to do just on our own, and that really doesn't take into account if we do have a true, failure somewhere in our system. So I think it just, again, we got to wean ourselves off at some point on this thing. But again, that adds more stress to the whole thing about what does it do to the rates until we get new users into the system. So Calamar, they're over there working, things are happening, and we'll get an update from Jerry Hill at our meeting on the 2nd. But they're already pushed back to probably February. I could have just, but they're getting there. I mean, they're back working and stuff. So,
But they may be
but it delays.
in the rates for next year. I mean, we might
Right,
be able to
for-
say 122 new users are brought in, and that's going to really help the rates next
Right.
year.
So
So I think that'll be good.
just food for thought.
Yeah. One other thing is, so in the collected allocation fees, I think there's about $24,000 of allocation fees that were collected in September and October of 2020, so that would have been in this fiscal year. And I think, we can just leave those to stay in retained earnings, or we
Last
could.
fiscal year, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they weren't certified they would be certified as of June 30th, right?
Yeah.
So they're sort of new. And when we originally did the wastewater plant, we set up a sewer capital stabilization fund. And those allocation fees were supposed to go into that fund to be able to help support the rates in this, I want to say, initial time when the users aren't there. That can be a little bit problematic, because if you suppose you took that money and you voted at the special town meeting to put in the stabilization fund, it wouldn't be available until it was certified again, right, next year. So there is a delay, so, but I think we have to start thinking about that. If we continue to, or make a decision, a policy decision about what should we be doing with the allocation fees, and if we're gonna have sewer development charts, what should we be doing with those? Where
Yep.
should they be going, and what we should be doing with them? I don't know if they can go directly into that fund. I don't think so. It's kind of like the ISOM host community fee, where you have to get it, certify it, and then move it, yeah. Okay, all right, so at this point, what you're recommending
So
is?
my
is-
recommendation would be to set the rates based on the 1183, which is, again, based on the budget that was presented at town meeting, with the only change being the reduction in the debt service by 26,000, which yielded a $24 decrease in the rate. And then the board obviously will have an opportunity to make further adjustments before the second half bill goes out and before the overage bills go out in the early spring.
Okay. And one of the reasons I would like to discuss the overage rates is if you take our capacity, right, 300,000 gallons per day once the thing's open, and you multiply that by 365, it's 109,500,000 gallons a year, right? And if you divide that in the budget, you're at 1.4 cents per gallon is your cost of your capacity. And so that's, to me, I mean, if you do it by our actual usage, you're at about 3.44 cents per gallon, and I wouldn't want to charge the businesses 3.4 cents per gallon. And even if we say it's 1.4 cents per gallon is the cost for our capacity, we might have to implement that over 2 years so that it's a little incremental, thing to businesses, which I think they're okay with. But if rates are dramatically increased on businesses, it's just crippling. And good. Okay. Anybody have anything else to say about sewer rates?
Maybe. So with the, one of the things that's distinctive about Bourne is that, we're not, it's not, Buzzards Bay is not filled with a lot of buildings. And so there's potential, but that potential is, that's why we have to walk more delicately, I think, in terms of, increasing the commercial rate, because, they can go to some town that already has buildings there, so they don't, and it's not in the flood zone and all those other things. So there are a lot of things that are extra challenges for us, and so I think that also supports not increasing the commercial overage rate so much.
Right, so I wouldn't want to do it too much, but on the other hand, when you have, little houses, paying, based on their 20,000 gallons of usage in 8 cents per gallon, but these commercial people are paying 1 cent.
Right.
That's not really fair. You have to find some way to equalize it, so the system is just a little bit more fair and equal for everybody, and I think we're on that track. Okay, any public comment on this? Okay, so next item is Board of Sewer Commissioners Policy Subcommittee. Discussion and possible vote to create a policy subcommittee to work on drafting policy with staff to present to the full board. I think it's really hard to do policy with the whole board unless there's been a lot of pre-work. And I think we have a lot of policy things to talk about in terms of the allocation policy and the sewer use regulations. And personally, I feel it would be beneficial to set up a policy subcommittee that could work with staff. And in sort of a later thing with having the wastewater advisory committee, for that policy subcommittee to work with the wastewater advisory committee, which when we had one, it had a member of the Board of Health, it had a member of the planning board, it had the health agent, it had a Buzzards Bay resident user, a business user. It brought a lot of people together with a lot of different points of view. So if you're talking about a rate change or something like that, you can get input from a lot of people. And so somehow I feel we need to do something that broadens the communication without making it too broad. So I don't know if anyone else thinks anything about this.
Yeah, I think everything's gonna have to be brought around to a more equal system, no matter what we're doing. The sewer seems to have so many ups and downs in so many different places. I agree.
I do agree, ma'am.
Little
that-
chunks.
Well, actually,
No, you, go ahead.
I mean, twofold. Yes, a policy subcommittee is needed. I think it will lessen the load of this board that has a lot of work going on, and they can bring it back to the full board eventually. And the wastewater advisory committee is something that needs a new charge anyways, but I think it should be reinstituted because that was a great group of dedicated experts and members, that did a lot of work. And I think it would be a great addition to support this board as well. So I am all in favor of re-energizing that committee.
Judy?
Yes, thanks. I think, the policy subcommittee, absolutely, that type of work, it's great to have that work done, with a smaller group of people and in a less formal setting than what our meetings are. Just for the exchange of, reading and, just very much tasked with doing that. I would really like to have staff very much involved with the policy because
Yes.
they're the ones who are the experts and they're the ones who understand, what the nuances are in terms of people actually going through the process. So I don't know, how it may slow things down. I'm not sure with having more, too many people on a committee and making it so that it slows it down also, for coming back to us. But I remember with the, I think it was the wastewater advisory committee that did the policy,
The allocation
policy.
Originally, there
And
was
so-
none.
Right, and they came forward with drafts, and that was actually really very helpful, because it, as Peter said, there's a lot of detail to it, and there's a lot of time, and, we're elected to listen to what people have to say, and to oversee and make sure that all the parts keep moving and keep happening, so, I'd be very much in favor of having, staff and, maybe a couple of people from, the general public involved with being on a policy subcommittee. The wastewater advisory, I'm not sure I'm quite ready to understand what that charge might be, so I can't sign off on, saying I
Yeah.
support that. I do support the policy sub.
So the wastewater advisory committee, one of the things I thought about when Helen talked about meeting with staff and doing reports, then staff had an ability for stakeholder meetings to meet with a consistent group of people. I mean, they can go out and they can meet with the Pecasset group, or they can go out and meet with the Great Gables group, or they can go out and meet with the Save the Canal group. But if you have inputs from those groups, if you also have a consistent group of people who, and this is how I see the wastewater, this is really how it was, because that's what happened in the initial planning for the wastewater facility. There was a CWMP study, there was this study, there was some initial budget numbers. And all of that was done with the wastewater advisory committee where they would meet, but it wasn't necessarily where they were meeting with the consultants. Wes Ewell was our representative, our sort of project manager, which would probably go to a staff person now to be that person. And, so they would bring that information to wastewater advisory. And then you have someone who's a business user of the sewer system. And you say, well, we're thinking about changing the overage rates. And this is why we're thinking about it, and this is what we were thinking about doing, and how do you think that would how the businesses would feel about that? And then that person who's in the business community can go and talk to some of the business users and say, well, how do you feel about this? Is this something you could handle? Because when I was in my quest for being on the board, and I met with people in the business community about the rates, they seemed to be okay with small incremental increases. What really scared them is if you were the laundromat, you were going to go from $25,000 to $56,000 in your rate. I mean, he was going to put in a water recycling system, so he wouldn't be using water or sewer, because at that point it would be more cost effective for him. But that's really how it is. It's really a sounding board for things where you have a more broad perspective, and people from different areas for relating to the CWMP, you really need to have people from Pecasset or people from different areas of the town who are really familiar to be part of it. So I think we have to think about the charge and the makeup of the committee, but I think we should start thinking about that, because I think it would be very helpful.
I absolutely agree. It's helpful to have stakeholders involved, and actually imperative to have stakeholders involved. I guess some of my hesitation is that, we've hired the consultants with a very specific contract and agreement that, how they'll spend their time, and that they are the experts and they're working together with the experts, and they have made a commitment to working with, making sure they involve stakeholders. I'm not saying cut the public out, but,
Right.
that's what, and that consistency and the professionalism of professionals who are consultants is really important. And I guess some of my trepidation, it has to do with, sometimes when people think they're experts and they're involved and they take some information and they spin it to how they want to, and then it becomes reality because it's on Facebook or it's on Twitter or whatever it is. And I'm so incredibly hesitant to support anything that would be, that would not be in sync with the people that we've hired, And so I guess that's where, it's a big trepidation because I've seen, there's been a lot of it. And, people want to, make sure their point is put across, but it's not necessarily in sync with what is being actually gathered, and not that, in the research phase of things. So I guess that's where my little trepidation is.
So I'll give you a piece of history for me. So when I was first on the school board in Southborough, we went forward with a building project, and there were some people that were against it, and we went to town meeting and we failed.
Mhm.
And when we reconstituted our planning committee, building planning committee, we brought those people onto the committee. And having the people there throughout the process and understanding it meant that when we went to town meeting the second time, the project was overwhelmingly approved. And at the end of the day, for a comprehensive wastewater management plan, you got to get $40 million or $50 million of support from the community, however you're going to do it. And so getting those people, I have always felt getting those people involved in the beginning and listening to them helps you in the end. And
I agree.
And so I'm not sure how to do it, who the right players are, or what to do, or whether you just do it through groups. But I do think a wastewater advisory committee that has a group of people that are consistent for bouncing off ideas and having different perspectives is very helpful. Glenn first, or you
Go ahead,
first,
go ahead.
either one.
Yeah.
George, I'll defer to.
All right, I just was just making a passing comment. This is all tethered to economic development. I mean, we are moving in that direction, but we have to be very careful because we are in recovery mode, and there's always blips on the screen, like the pandemic. That just kind of undid everything for a while. But as long as we are focused on not over leveraging or over dependence on commercial versus, and that's part of our regular tax rate, but also water rates or anything, it's got to be seen as fair. And we don't have an economic development person right now, but somehow de facto we're going to have to either come up with one or hire one pretty soon to concentrate on that and lead us forward, because we do have a lot of expertise out there that we can tap into, and it's just identifying who among us, whether they be citizens, business owners, our contractors, and just where we're going to use these. But it's we do have to be thinking of it's a fragile recovery, and we have to step carefully.
Cautiously.
Good word. Okay, thank you.
Glenn.
I was going to say, just kind of to bring it back to the policy subcommittee.
Yeah.
I do think there is a lot for this board to consider. we put in a lot of staff time last year, particularly with the tie and bond study, if you remember that. That's one thing that this board, I think, has to make a determination if we're going to continue to move in that direction. There was again, a lot of work to do that way, so I think the policy subcommittee could probably help us, if you will, prioritize. Should be on this staff. I think we had the board of selectmen too. We had a organization plan. We might have had 30 policies on that plan that was just overwhelming to tackle all at once, and we had to pick. What was going to be number one, what was going to be number two. This is what we're going to take on as staff and as the board. So I think that policy subcommittee, I think they do have a lot of work to do. I think it'd be great to have them sit down, and we can kind of vet out ideas and again, kind of come up with a strategy for what we are going to be working on over the next year anyways, if not multiple years.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of work for that policy subcommittee to be doing. I know you had a agenda tracker, I had an agenda tracker, there might be 25 things on that agenda tracker, and
Growing.
yeah, and growing. Exactly.
You gotta narrow it.
You're right, you do have to narrow it down. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're gonna get
Yes.
something accomplished, again, just like the Board of Selectmen found out, you gotta focus on what you really wanna accomplish, and you gotta point the team in that direction.
Judy?
So I want to swing back to the wastewater committee, wastewater advisory committee.
Yep.
I do agree it is important to have, people, the different types of stakeholders very much involved. And, whether if they're on a committee, I think we have to have a very clear charge. I'm also, somewhat hesitant from what I've observed in Bourne over quite a few years, is that we are now at a time period where we need to make sure that the people who are signing off on things and the people who are doing things are the people who are paid to do it. And so I would want to make sure that that comes through very clearly, because now we have, in a way, the luxury of that, of having, trained professionals who are the people who sign off on things. So I think we would need to be very clear about what the charge would be. So I'm just kind of, I'm throwing a few things out there that are cautionary but it doesn't mean I'm opposed to, things that are just cautionary types of things. And I do think people should be very much, engaged, and we have to figure out in what ways. So, thanks.
Anybody else?
If I may. So just a couple of quick things. I agree with Judy, and I think one of the problems that we have had in the past is people would come on boards and committees, and they wouldn't have the parameters that they're supposed to work within. And even as we appoint new people to these committees and committees and boards and all of these things, I think one of the important things that is missed is people don't understand the parameters, the restrictions, where they're supposed to be working and how they're supposed to be doing it. Unfortunate things have happened in the past where people in committees and boards were running things rather than, maybe a project manager or staff and they should have been. I think those parameters just need to be clarified and make sure that everyone's aware of them. And now that we're starting from scratch, I think it's a good place to put those in and make sure that people understand them. That's my only thing about that.
And I think that is really helpful. And I really think that as we talk about committees, we need to talk about what staff person is the lead person assigned to that committee, because that staff person is a really important piece of the puzzle. Tony?
I think one of the ways to maybe address what Judy and Jared are talking about, because we tend to put out a charge, which in most cases, it's somewhat generic. But I think in this particular case, because complexity of it, there's a board that's overseeing a lot of, there's professional staff that's professional consultants. It decides to establish a committee to make it a task committee. So you're going to give it, do this task, when you're done, you're done. Do this task, when you're done, you're done. And that can help, focus them on really specific things that the sewer commissioners may want them to look at to help focus them, and when that's done, it's done, and then you have a different task. And so some committees, because they don't, necessarily necessarily have a board that's overseeing them. They function like that. I mean, take Shore and Harbor, for instance, right? They do a lot of, there's nobody over top of them. This particular one has a lot of overhead. And what you want to be careful of, because we have a lot of things to look at, is you're not adding a, lack of a better word, a layer of bureaucracy into it that can quickly get disjointed and different people are out doing different things. And it can be confusing to know, who's actually in charge between the policy makers, decision makers, right? That kind of thing. So you may want to consider in that it is a task-oriented committee, and then you issue them the tasks that you would like them to laser in on or focus on, whatever that happens to be, and might be a way to kind of do that. Because I think we have a couple of committees that approach could be useful, and besides this one, but I think that could be helpful to the commissioners to have it as a task committee, not one that's all over the place. That might be hard to get your arms around, again, because there are so many different fingers in the pie.
And excuse me,
Go ahead.
Chair, and through that, I think also the reporting, the reporting back to the sewer commissioners, so that we have consistent practices. I know you love calendars and checklists, and so here we are, and so do I. So here we are. We'll have those, but that's a great, that sets up a rhythm of reporting, even if it's just a brief report, it's on a regular basis, and tying that into what a committee's charge is.
Yeah.
Because I think, Tony's right. There's a lot of, there seems to be things where there are people working in lots of different directions, and it's like, no, well, I thought you were in charge of that. I thought you were in charge of that. Oh, well, I'm in charge of that. Well, who are you? So we don't want to play that game. So.
Well, it sounds like in terms of the wastewater advisory committee, we need to hone down a little bit more on what we want them to do and who they'd want to be, who we want them to be. So maybe staff can think about that. Maybe we can put that back to staff and say, if you were going to have a wastewater, if there were to be one set up, what do you think would be beneficial, and who do you think would be good to be on it? And then you could bring that back to us as a recommendation. I think that
Would be great.
I think that would be, yeah.
Just, say something quickly,
Yeah,
as long as, I think you were making the point, the mission is finite. And I think there's a lot of good people that we've attracted lately to these committees where there's an end in sight, rather than making a long-term commitment that a lot of people can't do. But this, I think we would be able to attract, especially if the wastewater advisory, if that were to be subdivided into mini missions or whatever
Right.
works, because the committee itself could last for a long time. However, attracting people from either village or background or whatever, I think that would serve us well. Thank you.
So let's go back to the Board of Sewer Commissioners Policy Subcommittee. So personally, I think we should sort of vote to establish a policy subcommittee and look at ask for 2 volunteers who would be willing to do it, to work with staff. Because it would definitely be to work on drafting policy with staff to present to the full board. And I think that would be helpful, because we have, and included in policy is like the sewer development charge policy, and the allocation policy, and the regulations policy. And those are 3 things that we got to really sort of nail down, so I would put those as, so I think,
So would you like a motion?
I would.
A motion to create a Board of Sewer Commissioners Policy Subcommittee consisting of at least 2 board members of the Board of
No more
Commissioners.
than 2.
No more than 2 members of the Board of Sewer Commissioners. Yeah. You wanted-
And
Glenn
staff.
has his hand up.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just for the board's consideration, so one thing that does happen with the open meeting law is even a subcommittee of the board has
It's
to have a posted
posted,
meeting. So
yes.
if the board does choose to have 3 and you have a quorum of the board, almost in a way, so be it, we're posting it anyways, we'll be taking minutes, so whether it's 2 or 3, it's
Doesn't matter.
It's probably
It's-
right.
It's like the
Yeah.
school committee subcommittees. They are open meetings, they are posted. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, if you really have
No.
3 members that want to be on it, you know.
So who's interested? Raise your hand.
Well, we have a motion.
Well, I was gonna say, is your motion at least 2 board members or 2 board
Yeah,
members?
I just threw that in there. I was-
Well, I know I wouldn't be the only board member. So,
So if there were 3 people that were interested, we could do 3. If there's 2 people that are interested, we could do 2. So,
As a ratepayer, I wish to stay out of it until that my issue is dealt with.
I'll volunteer.
I volunteer. That's 2.
And you
sounds
were?
like 2.
Oh, okay, I will volunteer if that does
Sounds like
not
3.
Yeah,
add,
so we can do 3.
There you go.
okay.
3-person policy subcommittee.
Not that I don't care.
No, you know what? It's fine. It's good.
All right, so shall I mumble the motion again? Motion to create a Board of Sewer Commissioners Policy Subcommittee consisting of 3 members of the Board of Sewer Commissioners.
Second,
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous, 500. Do we want to make a motion to appoint people?
Sure.
I make a motion that we appoint Judith Froman.
No,
George-
No, she's not doing it.
She's not doing it? Okay, so who are the 3 members?
Just 3.
George,
Okay.
MJ, and Jared.
All right, my motion is to appoint George Slade, MJ Mastrangelo, and Jared McDonald to the policy subcommittee.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? 500.
Terms expire normally,
6:30,
yeah, it's 2022,
22.
but we go once a year.
once a year appointment, yep.
Yep.
Okay.
There's no charge to talk about right now.
Well, I believe that the next item on the agenda is discussion relative definition of the sewer development charge and clarification on who pays this charge. And when the charge is to be assessed, possible referral to the policy subcommittee for discussion.
Awesome.
In tandem with Peter? Is it?
Sorry. I can't contain myself.
So, and then the item after that is commercial wastewater management allocation policy and sewer regulation, discussion and possible vote to recommend having this was to have a consultant advise and work with the Board of Sewer Commissioners or policy subcommittee on these policies.
Well, where's that money gonna come from?
Well, that's not a reason to say no. We
No,
could
I
think
know,
about it.
but
Commercial wastewater allocation.
Is there funds? Is that what that?
First question, yeah.
I think we do have consulting funds for the Board of Sewer Commissioners.
Yeah, but
You don't know?
I would tie it to the enterprise fund. I don't know if I pay for it out of the general fund. I mean,
No,
we
no,
do.
no, I meant in the sewer, is there consultants? And I don't know
No.
if it's all,
Oh, in the sewer enterprise fund?
yeah.
Yeah, there, let me check, if you guys,
Well, we could we could refer it and then discuss whether we need it and then come back and,
I think.
well, I'm gonna look real quick. I mean, I have budget right here, so.
I mean, I would recommend that you refer to the policy subcommittee, and
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
let that policy subcommittee come up with their recommendations.
Yep.
There's a lot of work to be done. And just in being realistic with your time, pick the ones that you want to see, and then we can probably pick and choose whether or not we want to bring on board a consultant, whether or not we need to.
okay.
Which we very well need to. So let the subcommittee kind of chew it over.
I like that.
So we could have a motion
Yes.
to direct the Board of Sewer Commissioners Policy Subcommittee to review and make recommendation relative to amending or creating a new system development charge, reviewing the allocation policy and the sewer regulations
So moved.
to be presented to the Board of Sewer Commissioners at a future date.
So moved.
Second.
'Cause I'm not reading that again.
Okay.
So we do have 25,000 in the budget for services consultants in the sewer enterprise fund.
Okay.
We'll have to
So
look
we'll-
and see what historically we do that, but maybe you guys talk about it first. I don't think you'd want to maybe
Yeah,
make that
and
decision right now.
I think it's a discussion of whether or not with staff, as we talk about what work you've done on these policies, how they've developed, and whether or not we need to bring someone in, or whether we feel solid and that we can just move forward with them. So,
Right.
Yeah, trust me, there are critical decisions that do need to be made.
Yes,
And which avenue you go will determine how much work.
right, right. So, it's, we are reviewing sewer development charge, allocation policy, and the sewer regulations to the policy subcommittee.
We have a motion and a second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? 500. Okay. That took care of A, B, C, D, E. So now,
Little E.
moving on to Board of Sewer Commissioner meeting schedule, setting regular dates for the Board of Sewer Commissioners meetings as the fourth Tuesday of each month. When we can maybe talk about November and December around Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I think if we're consistent on when we're meeting, it's helpful.
Yeah, I like that.
And I will note that the One Cape is 23rd and 24th of August, so if people are actually thinking about going, that would be
Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday, and it gets out at 3 o'clock in Harwich on that Tuesday, so
What is that?
the One Cape Summit.
Oh, the one.
Take on Commission 1.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think a lot of people seem to be saying that they're gonna go it virtually, so I was gonna try to do the second day, because the Selectmen's Council's meeting that
That's
day,
right.
but
That's right.
I'm fine with meeting. I mean, it's over at 3, and if we have an executive session at 6 or 6:30 for IMA discussion, you know, I'm okay with that, so we'll just stick with the 4th, so if that's good with everyone.
Yep.
And, for that meeting, some of the things that kind of highlighted for the agenda are the Wareham IMA Strategy Executive Session, the I&I Study Report, vote the user rates. We're not going to vote the overage rates, but we might have further discussion on that. And discuss and vote the budget adjustment for the special town meeting, because that would be our last meeting before that budget adjustment. And discuss and vote the IMA negotiation team, and any policy updates. I'll start putting policy as an agenda item.
We're a policy-making body. Yeah, I think
Yes,
we
we
are.
are.
Reinforces it.
So if everyone's fine with that, we'll just have consensus that that'll be our meetings. Next item is correspondence. There's no correspondence. So next item is a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? It's unanimous, 500.